Good evening and welcome to the September 12th DRHPC Commission meeting. Could we have a call to order? And could we have a roll call, please?
Yep. Commissioner Cormany?
Aye.
Commissioner HARASZTHY?
Here.
Commissioner HAREN?
Here.
Commissioner JAHROMI?
No.
And Chair AMAR.
Present.
Thank you.
Next, we'll do an approval of the agenda. Let's see here. So we'll review and accept the agenda. Does anyone have a desire to change the order? And if not, let's have a motion to approve, please.
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
I second.
And let's have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Cormany?
Aye.
Commissioner HARASZTHY?
Aye.
Commissioner HAREN?
Aye.
Commissioner JAHROMI? And Chair AMAR.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Now I will ask staff if there's any late correspondence.
No late correspondence was received.
Thank you. And are there comments from the public? Nobody's in the room, but is there anybody on Zoom?
There are currently no hands raised on Zoom.
Thank you. Now we'll move to the consent calendar. We have 3.1 minutes from the regular design review and historic preservation meeting on August 8th, 2023. Do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I motion to approve the minutes of the meeting.
I second that motion.
Thank you. Have a roll call vote, please.
Yep. Commissioner Cormany?
Aye.
Commissioner HARASZTHY?
Aye.
Commissioner HAREN?
Aye.
Commissioner JAHROMI? And Chair AMAR.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Moving on to the public hearing. We have item 4.1, discussion, consideration, and possible action to approve the design review application of Juancho C. Isidoro Jr. and Anne Coakley at 21 Chase Street, including action to approve a categorical exemption pursuant to California Environmental Quality Act, Section 15301. Could we have the staff report, please?
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Elena Lipp, Contract Associate Planner. The project today for 21 Chase Street is a design review. Permit ID UA2315. The project site at 21 Chase is between Broadway and Nathanson Creek, behind a commercial site fronting onto Broadway at 800 Broadway. The site is a mixed-use zoned and mixed-use land use parcel, so it is a residential use on the site, but it has a different underlying zoning, so it has different floor area ratio than other typical residential uses. It is also important to note that it is on the border of Nathanson Creek and that it is adjacent to the Broadway corridor, but not within it. So the project site has an existing duplex residential unit. The style is associated, but is not necessarily strictly adherent to the Craftsman style. It has a gabled roof, decorative brackets, exposed rafters under the eaves, and a front porch. It has 2 units, one in the front and one in the back. The structure was built in 1924 and was originally located at the corner of Chase and Broadway and was later moved in the 1960s, 1961 to its current location and divided into a duplex while the original site was subdivided by a parcel map. An HRE was prepared on behalf of the applicant by Evans and DeShazo. The HRA concluded that the existing residential structure, was not associated with significant events in our history, significant people, was not distinctive architecture or construction, and did not have the potential to yield information about our prehistory, so it was not eligible as a historic resource, even though it is listed on some local historic inventories. It's important to distinguish that that is not the same as being a listed historic resource and designated as such. So the proposed project is to add approximately 791 square feet of conditioned living space in a variety of ways. First, they would reconfigure the front entryway of the front unit to enclose the front porch and construct a larger projecting front porch with supporting posts. It would also expand the second floor of both units by about 245 square feet in width on the second floor. And they would construct a 546 square foot single story addition with a 16-foot vaulted ceiling and a covered wraparound porch on the rear residential unit. The project includes reconfiguration of the interiors of both units and removal of a covered mudroom at the rear of the back unit and replacement with a uncovered porch. And on the left and right is the existing versus the proposed site plan. So you can see that the front porch has been enclosed and a new front porch has been built out at the front, that the rear mudroom is removed and replaced by a unenclosed porch, and the approximately 500 square foot addition to the right that adjoins the rear unit. I also want to point out the line that demarcates 30 feet from top of bank from Nathanson Creek and show that the project is not intruding upon that setback. There is also a proposed future location of a pool, but the pool is not included in this approval. And I guess that was just informational on the part of the applicant. So this is the existing and proposed front elevation. On the top, you can see that the existing dormers are not symmetrical, and that would be modified in the new structure to be symmetrical. Also, that the top dormers have horizontal siding, and that will be replaced with cement stucco to match the rest of the structure. All windows and doors will be replaced and replaced to be matching. And you can see how the rear addition is going to protrude and be visible from the front public right-of-way. And so while not necessarily germane to the exterior of the structure, I wanted to show how the first floor is changing to modify the interior, just for informational purposes. And how the second floor is changing to expand to widen the second floor to achieve more livable floor area within the structure. New exterior cement stucco will be painted antique white by Kelly Moore to match the existing color of the residence, and the existing gray asphalt roof shingles will be replaced by similar looking gray or black asphalt roof shingles. The garage is a detached garage with a shed, and no other changes other than replacing the garage door with new are proposed. The exterior plaster will be retained, and the new structure will be covered in cement plaster to match the existing texture. So in our analysis, the project complies with applicable development standards, including height, floor area, coverage, the front setback, rear setback, and creekside development setback. Now the front setback is 20 feet, and pursuant to the Sonoma Municipal Code, a unenclosed covered front porch may project into the front setback up to 10 feet, but not closer than 10 feet to the front property line, so long as not more than 3 feet from grade. So the porch is 12 feet 1 inch from the front property line, so it complies with this standard. And similar with the rear setback pursuant to municipal code, an uncovered outside feature may project up to 3 feet into the required rear setback, but not closer than 10 feet to the rear property line. The proposed porch is 1 foot 6 inches above grade and projects only 1 foot 7 inches into the rear setback, and it achieves this development standard. And as I previously mentioned, the project does not come within the 30 feet of the top of Nathanson Creek, top of bank. The project has to meet design review and historic overlay zone findings. And you can find the written findings attached to the staff report. The project is eligible for a categorical exemption under section 15301 in existing facilities, which allows for modifications and additions to existing structures where the addition is not more than 50% of the floor area of the structures before the addition, or 2,500 square feet, whichever is less. In this case, this complies with that guideline. So staff is recommending that the DRHCP approve the design review permit as proposed, subject to the attached findings and conditions of approval. Staff is available for questions. I don't believe the property owner or architect are present this evening. Architect is online? Oh, okay. Architect is present online.
Great, thank you. Do we have questions for staff?
I have a question, and I don't know if it's staff or architect. And I'm looking at it, it looks like they're going to maintain this as 2 units. Is that correct? It's going to have they're still dividing wall. It's still going to be 2 units, right?
Yes, the units will still be divided, will still be 2 units. There will be more bedrooms on the rear unit, and the interiors of both units are going to be reconfigured somewhat to be more, it seems, more ergonomic and updated.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, and let's have the applicant come on.
All right, Juancho, we should be able to hear you.
Yes, I thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Juancho C. Isidoro Jr. I'm the architect for this project. Ms. Lip did such a wonderful job of presenting the project. I actually don't have much to add to her presentation, so I'm here available for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Juancho. So, do we have questions for the applicant?
I have one. So I noticed in the existing house you have the wood siding and then you're going to stucco. Can you explain to me the decision-making there?
Actually, the existing building is mostly stucco. The siding is the upper, how do you say, the second floor dormers are the ones that are covered with siding. And that's the one that we're gonna expand slightly and refinish it with a matching stucco finish, just like the ground floor level.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Do we have any public comments?
There are currently no hands raised on Zoom and no one physically here for comment.
Thank you. So I'll close the meeting to the public and bring it back to our commission. So, Commissioner Cormany, would you like to begin?
Sure. This is one of those properties in Sonoma that you don't really notice, and particularly with construction going on now, it kind of is, and then I went by, well, wow, I didn't even notice that. So I don't think that the visual impact is a real concern to me from the street and such. And I think what you've designed, and it makes a lot of sense to me. I understand why you're going that route to add some square footage, and overall it looks like it's well executed and well thought out. I'm in support.
Thank you. Commissioner HARASZTHY?
I'm in support also. I think it's going to be a nice upgrade, and it does meet with all of the standards, so I have no problem with the project. Thank you.
And Commissioner HAREN?
I agree with my fellow commissioners. Thank you for the detailed staff report. And I think the new proposal actually aesthetically looks nice, increasing square footage of livable space, and plus it adheres to all requirements as put forth in the staff report. So appreciate the detail of the staff report, and I have no further questions at this time.
And Commissioner JAHROMI?
I agree with my co-commissioners, and I think that's a straightforward project for betterment of the environment that people live in that building, and I have no objection to the proposed design.
Thank you. I agree with my fellow commissioners. It is quite a little bit it's a little bit enchanting, a little bit nostalgic. It's not quite super historical, but there's a little charm to it, and it definitely has that little Sonoma thing going on. So I'm happy to see that it's not a complete overhaul, and you're sticking to basically the same aesthetic, and I think all the changes are just going to very drastically improve it for the folks living there. So thank you for your presentation.
One more comment.
One more comment?
I also would like to thank the architect and the owner for keeping it 2 units, particularly on the east side. The temptation to blow it out and make it into another home and lose a rental, I think I commend you for keeping the units. Appreciate it.
And the historical evaluation that came with it. Thank you for doing that. So, would a commissioner like to make a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve our item report 4.1 for the property at 21 Chase Street, subject to findings and conditions of approval.
I second that.
And roll call, please.
Commissioner Cormany,
Aye.
Commissioner HARASZTHY,
Aye.
Commissioner HAREN,
Aye.
Commissioner JAHROMI,
Aye.
and Chair AMAR.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Now it looks like we have on our items for discussion, Secretary of the Interior Standards presentation. Will we be doing that tonight? All right.
I'm ready this time.
Oh, good.
So I wanted to just start out with asking how many of you were able to watch the second one that was a couple of weeks ago?
I did.
You did? Okay. So I heard I wasn't able to watch it, but I did hear it was a more specific and relatable than the first one. And I also wanted to make sure that you saw the email from today that the third one is postponed. So it will not be this week. So it'll be postponed until October or November to flush it out a little bit more, they said. So the new date will come out soon. They don't have it yet. So I wanted to make sure you saw that. And so my goal today is to have a conversation around some of the things that you learned about and heard, or things that you've heard in general, and then how does that look in Sonoma. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail. I'm keeping it pretty general, and then I'll come back and talk about 2 of the standards in the future, because those are the ones that really apply to the commission, and that's in relation to alterations and additions. So, but you'll see what I'm talking about when I get into the weeds here in a second. So I'll have pictures so we can see what we're talking about. As stated, we're going to talk today about the Secretary of Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. You'll learn when I do presentations, I like to start with quotes. It's kind of how I set the stage for what my presentation is really focused on, and so I like to use other people's quotes. And this one actually comes directly from the National Park Service about what is historic preservation. And I just love this sentence and the fact that it states that it's a conversation with our past about our future. And I think I'm one of those people that does believe that we can learn so much from the past and what we want to do with our future and how do we move forward. What worked, what didn't work. We are constantly learning. But you have to open your mind out to what we did in the past and learn from it. So things that we've talked about are the types of historic properties. I don't know to what level of detail in the last, if they've talked about it, but I wanted to just highlight. So this is going to focus mostly on just the plaza area so that you have that easy relationship. Everybody knows the plaza. So there are 5 types of historic properties. We have an object. So in this case, what you're seeing is the actual the Bear Flag Monument. That is considered an object. It's actually a California State Historic Landmark, number 7, in case you didn't know that. It is a historic landmark. It was built in the early 1900s. The state legislature actually contributed funds to actually build that. The next would be a structure. And so an example are some of our historic bridges. So this is one of those historic bridges that is considered in the Plaza District. A building. Most of the things that we see on a normal basis are buildings here at Design Review. The next is a district. So here you see the Sonoma Plaza District. This is the extended boundary that was done after the initial district was recognized. The plaza itself is a National Historic Landmark. When they extended the boundaries of the district, they don't have national significance. They have state and local significance. A National Historic Landmark means it has national significance. That's when you see those words there. Listed on the National Register, just to throw another ringer in there. If you're listed on the National Register, it doesn't mean that you're significant nationally. It just means that you are significant and listed, but you could be significant at the local level. Okay, so it could just be important to us here in Sonoma. And then the other item is a site. And so a good example of a site is our California State Historic Park that we have around the Mission. That is considered a site. So all that collection of buildings, structures, those all are, and where they're oriented, that all has to do with the creation of a site. So our historic district for the Sonoma Plaza contains objects, structures, buildings, and sites. So that's why I stuck to the plaza. Keep it simple. So is it historic? I mean, a lot of people say, okay, it's old. It's not historic. And so we have this conversation, and that's why we'll get into a little bit about historic resource evaluations, but that's why we're asking the questions is is this building, structure, object, what is its context? Does it have to do with a certain theme in our history? Whether that's from the time of the Mission, is it the time of commercial development in Sonoma? Is it, what is that? And what is that time frame? Historic significance can be related to a specific event, such as the bear flag itself is an event. Person, so here I have a picture of Vallejo, or the design, the architecture that we see, and then also prehistory, so our Native American past that we have, and it's very prevalent here in Sonoma. And then the next question is integrity. And that's a long list of items that we look at along integrity. And so those are all the things that are talked about when you get that historic resource evaluation for these properties. These are all the things that they're looking for. So when you look at this, you can see automatically, so these are old, obviously, historic images. You know that that's the Mission. It looks the same, except it's been restored. And you can see the corner of Napa in Spain right there. So you can see kind of that history and how it plays out as far as the integrity goes. In our municipal code, we do identify that to be designated at a local level, that it must be associated with an event. So the same ideas that are in the National Register: event, a person, architecture, or the potential to yield information. So that's our prehistory. So just as we talked about the Plaza Historic District, it's significant for its association with architecture, military, political, our settlement from 1823 to 1850, commerce with specific dates from 1848 to 1933, as well as archaeology. There are 82 buildings, 3 sites, 1 structure, and 2 objects within our historic district. And as we stated earlier, there's national, state, and local significance. They didn't designate prehistory. That's a question that I have. So I will look into that more. So when we look at historic districts, we always want to look at also the period of significance. So what is that time frame? That is that history. And so that's what we're looking at to preserve, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But for the plaza, it's 1835 to 1944. So over 100 years of history that we are looking at within our Plaza District. And how are we maintaining that integrity of those structures, objects, and buildings? Recently, we did the Sonoma Depot Historic District. So you guys, this committee approved this recently, and it is significant for our growth as a city in tourism and industry. It is not significant at the state level or at national level like our plaza. It's just important to us in the city. There are 7 single-family residences that are part of this, 2 commercial buildings, and then the Sonoma Depot, which is actually a reconstructed building. So remember that word, reconstructed. So these are all aspects. And then the dates for this one is 1890 to 1942. So that's the period of significance for that. I'm not going to go through every district. I'm just showing you 2 examples. So we ask for a historic resource evaluation to help us determine if a structure or a building is historic. So in the city, it is required to provide that information if you're in the overlay zone. But also, when we look at the districts, these have already been done. So we already have historic resource evaluations for them, but we don't have the level of detail that you would see. So we have a survey that was done, identifies just a little paragraph about each building. And as you know, our historic resource evaluations are a lot more robust for each building. We're going to look into the details of who all lived there and what's been changed in the building over time, things like that, all the permits, history. So that's why we're asking for his historic resource evaluation. It helps us know where's the integrity in the structure if it is historic, who's it associated with, and what are those characteristics, those character defining features that we talk about that mean something for that building, that represent that time or that person when they lived there, things like that. Is that still intact? Because that's what we're looking to preserve. If it's not intact, then we have more flexibility with some of those things, such as, let's say the roof material has changed, then continuing to change that is really, can be done. It's when we start changing things from where it was their integrity, that material was still good, and maintaining that is the goal. And I'll go into that a little bit more. So does it have integrity, obviously, is one of those questions. And then is it eligible for listing? And that includes at our local level. So does it meet our code as important to us? And if yes, that's when we start talking about the Secretary of Interior standards. And I'm going to go talk about that a little bit more. So when do we apply the treatments? We apply these treatments when we have an actual project being presented to us that's being proposed for a site. So there's 4 treatments. Preservation, it is just like what you think it is. It's the actual maintaining of the structure in its existing form, keeping it as it is. A good example would obviously be our State Historic Park mission. Or restoration. Same idea. State Historic Park, they obviously, you saw the old picture of the mission, they restored the mission. They put in the new side, the new plaster siding so that maintain that adobe, because otherwise the adobe will melt. It'll just wash away. Rehabilitation, that's the one we deal with most often. That's the treatment that allows for additions and alterations to a historic structure. And then reconstruction. And there's my keyword for when we talked about the depot a minute ago. So you can allow for reconstructions if they meet certain requirements. That would be mine. Yeah. So just what we've been talking about in these, or the California Preservation Foundation has been presenting is on the standards. These are specific standards for rehabilitation. There are 10 of them. So these are the first 5. So the first one is basically about the use itself. So it can be maintained as its historic use or altered under the standards for rehabilitation, altered to a new use that doesn't really change too much. What you see typically is, for an example, the Carnegie Library. Looks the same from the outside as it did as a library, but inside it has completely different uses than a library, right? Historic character of the property will be retained and preserved. Removal of distinctive materials or alterations will be avoided. It's a good goal. Each property is recognized as a physical record of its time. So things have changed, but what we don't want to do is create a false sense of what I call historicity. So you're not, if you have a vernacular home, very plain, simple, we see some of these vernacular farmhouses here, and then people want to add frill to it to make it look more Victorian or Queen Anne style. So that's a false sense of historic, right? They're maybe plain, and that's okay. Changes that in the property that have acquired historic significance. This is also why we look at the period of time in which something is significant. It may have changed over time and gained significance with that. In some cases, we've had additions done by famous architects on some of these buildings, or architects that are important to us, so we want to maintain those as well. And then again, just distinctive materials, features, and construction techniques, things that we want to maintain. Deteriorated historic features. The goal is to repair when you can, replace as the second option. Chemical and physical treatments are not advised unless that's needed. So you don't want to sandblast a brick building, because you remove all of the hard casing on a brick building and you open it, and now all the interior of the brick melts away with any rainstorm. Archaeological resources to be protected and preserved in place. You see this on a lot of old missions, actually. There in San Juan Capistrano is an example that I know of, where they found remnants of old adobe buildings, and they decided to create a park, and they put a layer over that park to keep all of the foundations underneath, and then they just put a park on top of it. So they keep all the archaeological remnants of it. In another jurisdiction that I've worked, there was a house, then they found Native American mittens, which is basically trash, from Native American use on a bluff next to the water. And so that section was actually sectioned out from the development of a new single-family home as a no-build area. And then it'll be covered and maintained as such. So just things like that are what they're talking about. And then 9 and 10 are about new additions, how they need to be differentiated. They shouldn't be matchy-matchy. And that can be done with doing like materials, but just maybe varying the width of a clapboard siding, or doing a different trim work on the windows, or different style of windows, things like that. And then also the idea with number 10 is that if you do an addition, the idea is that in the future, let's say, somebody wanted to restore it back to what it was, it's easy to just remove and put back what was there. A lot of people have questions in regards to accessibility, life safety issues, basically our building code. California does have a historic building code that allows us to look closer at accessibility and other changes. So you may have a railing that doesn't meet current building height. You don't have to replace it, but you can reach that height by doing alternates, like maybe a different top of material or things like that. So that's the idea behind our historic building code. And then sustainability is also another big topic. The guidelines on sustainability is available on the National Parks website. And there's a lot of great information about our historic buildings are sustainable by design. There was no such thing as air conditioning at the time or heat, and so they were designed to let air pass through. That's why we always say the transom windows are very important. Ours at City Hall are painted closed, but they're still there. But that idea of just letting air pass through. We talked a little bit, and like I said, we'll go into more detail about alterations and new construction at a future time and look at specific types of projects and what does that look like. So examples. So this obviously On the left is what it looks like today at the Mission. And on the right is the picture from 1973 when they actually submitted the National Historic Landmark for the Plaza District, the nomination. So this was the picture then. And again, it's all about preservation and restoration on this specific site. And so you can kind of see how they've done that and how they've taken out some of the plants. So that's even something that is looked at when you're restoring a site, is we didn't have those kinds of trees or plants in that time. But that's not a typical application, and those are for specific types. So this is another interesting site. Does anybody know which this is? So this is the Vallejo Adobe. This is the Sunflower Cafe now. So again, 1970 picture on the top left, and then today on the right. Not much has changed. So this is an example of one that hasn't really been rehabilitated in the sense of it hasn't gone through a process to adaptively change it in any way, except for the portion that's the Dorado Hotel today, but I'm going to show you that one in a second. So there's this section that has been maintained and preserved, and it looks pretty similar to what it did. It looks like the railing was changed out, but that's probably about it. Also, when we're talking about character-defining features, and you look at that building, it's very distinct. It has not changed. Those columns are very specific. The railing is very specific. I took a picture of the window. So if you've looked very closely, you realize that this building is a 2-story adobe. That is why that thickness of that opening is so wide, is because that bottom floor is supporting all of that weight of that first floor. Very interesting how that's cut through. Mm-hmm.
So I have a question. This one, you're looking at the, I guess the right-hand side of this. The windows are different. The door's different. There's a porch. That's the El Dorado kitchen portion of it, I'm imagining. So
Yes.
I think you're going to address that in a moment.
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you.
So the sunflower and the adobe, that section of the adobe. So the adobe went all the way to the corner. And you'll see that here. I'm going to show you a picture in a second. So this is contributing. This section, this is contributing to our historic district. So this is a good view of what it looked like before City Hall was built. So this picture goes across the plaza all the way, and so you can see the Sonoma Hotel is in the corner, the 2-story building, so where the Girl in the Fig is today. And you can see also right here, see how the pitch of the roof line is the same as it is today on this side. And then you see this little line that goes down. All of this obviously is different, and that's where the El Dorado Hotel is. The El Dorado Hotel is non-contributing to the historic district. And I'll talk about that in a second. It's my last slide is talking about El Dorado.
But it also looks like the hotel has different windows and different roof line as well, right? Where Girl in the Fig is?
Yes, so the Girl in the Fig was modified. So this is where we talk about where, I didn't bring this one up, but you can see in that picture. So this was the original one in the 1800s, and it was modified, I want to say in the 20s. And so its new look, what we consider newer, the current one that we look at today, is significant because it's within that period of significance in the history of Sonoma in this Plaza District. So it, as it currently looks, is the historic look that we would maintain. We wouldn't say, oh, you need to restore it back to its 1800s look. But yes, you're correct. It is different. It's a 3rd floor now. It was only 2 stories. So this is also, obviously this is City Hall on the back. So this is another picture from the 1970s of City Hall. So these are our restrooms. and they were accessible from the exterior back in the day. And so when we talk about restoring or adapting the building, we looked to restore it back when they did the remodel. But you can't really tell unless you really get up close that all of this work is all new. All right here. The stones don't match exactly. They're very close, but they don't match exactly. And you can actually see the lines of where that opening was on both sides. In the new sill. Yep, there was doors from the outside to the bathrooms on both sides, and they've both been restored and have the windows put back and then this new stonework put in.
Were those original? The doors were original, or that was a modification?
It was a modification when they put in the restrooms. This is another one from the 1970s. I love these old pictures because I kind of like to see how things have changed over time. So this is another good example of what's changed. If the trees weren't, I have no idea what that is. I think it's the camera. Yeah. If you can see the Rexall drugs. So the mural is still there. It's been touched up over time. But Rexall drugs, probably in the 1950s, had a new facade put on to make it more modern, like a lot of them did. I'm from Oklahoma, and every small town ended up with metal. The metal, I call it the metal siding guy, came through, and it looks like cheese graters on every building, or other types of facades were applied to historic facades. I did not find the original picture of this block or this section of the block, so I'm not sure that that was historically accurate, like a restoration, but it's consistent with the styles that you see on the block. So you see those two buildings, those first two, were maybe not restored, but modified. And then you see the next ones are actually look exactly the same as they have. So this is a good example of what's changed, what hasn't. How do you do new design within our plaza? I was going to surprise you with this picture, but I think you all know what this picture is. Do you know what it is? It's on the plaza. This is the El Dorado. This is the El Dorado Hotel in the 1970s. At that time, it was determined to not be contributing to the historic district. Obviously, it looks very different than it did. And it looks even more different today. So this is an example, 70s. So you can kind of see what we look at over time is what's contributing, what's non-contributing. So we treat them differently when we look at it as a district versus an individual building as well. So some of our buildings, our original character defining features are still there. A lot of the historic material is still there, so the goal on those would be to preserve as much as possible. When you have non-contributing structures like this, we want it to still fit within the character of the district, but there's more flexibility in what they can do. And so, as you know, this is what it looks like.
So we had this number, I don't know, maybe a year ago.
Microphone.
And we reviewed this a number of, maybe about a year ago. They were talking about changing the windows, the number of panes per window to match the historic significance. So what were they matching back to?
I don't know. The only thing I can think of is these windows right here on the corner.
They were talking about all the lower level windows. I think these are, I don't know, they're 4x4, so they're 16
So
panes.
these were all divided light, which obviously we did not have here, and we did not have.
But they're also talking about the run down Spain Street. They were changing all those out. And I don't know if they ever did it, but they were changing the number of light count per window to match historic. But now looking at this, historic what?
Which historic? I don't know.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So we actually just took them to Planning Commission for a use permit modification, and they did change out all their windows at that time, but it was just consistent with what they already had. So again, this is where we go, we look back and we say, okay, this is non-contributing. It's been modified a lot, and it doesn't look anything like it did.
I like it better now.
So, but it fits within our character, right? It fits within the plaza's character. The back half of this building, this section here, is close. It's similar to what it's looked like for a while now. But I think that's why people are sometimes surprised, and that's why we don't want to create false history either. But we want things to fit within our character. And so that's why I wanted to end with this one, is just to kind of bring it all to why we look at what's original, what's changed over time, and then where is that flexibility when we look at these projects. And that historic resource evaluation tells you all of those things. It's going to tell you these are the original materials. The integrity of it is great, or it really needs repair or replacement. And so that's what we're looking for within these documents that we get, is to have them tell us, does it meet the standards? Are we meeting all 10 of these so that we can approve this project? And I will say that historians don't always agree. I will say that. And so that's why we look to have peer reviews and things like that. Sometimes you see reports, two reports from different historians, is because it helps us understand and make sure that we're meeting all of our requirements.
So does that mean that this building as it exists now, the El Dorado Kitchen, is not there's no historic significance to it? It's non-contributing? It just happens to be within the district, right?
Correct.
Interesting.
So there are other buildings within the district that do not contribute. So as we move forward with other design review projects that may come forward, that's the information that we'll be giving you is it eligible, or is it in a district but non-contributing or contributing? Does that help?
Yes,
You're
thank you so
welcome.
much. That was amazing. Appreciate it.
I wanted to keep it nice and condensed for this time. I'll expand them on little certain topics, but I think 9 and 10 are the additions and windows and things like that. We'll have another conversation about.
Great.
Okay.
What other jurisdictions have you worked in? So you mentioned it, just curious.
San Clemente, which is in Orange County, Laguna Beach. So those are the two main ones. And then I also worked for California Preservation Foundation. So, you're welcome.
I remember going here to the El Dorado Hotel for dinner.
Before?
Did you ever? Yeah, oh, you're too young. But yeah, it was kind of controversial when they wanted to switch this up. I do remember, because they really completely,
Oh, from this?
yeah, so there it is. And you walked in and it was dark.
That's not very nice.
All great Italian food.
No, that was good.
And so everybody was up in arms, how Sonoma is. But
Yes.
it's my first years living here. I remember the whole process of changing that, but I don't remember it looking like that at all.
Wow.
It's so funny. It's like what it looks like now, always in my head.
And as we know, it doesn't look anything like it did.
Yeah, it's a little better.
I have this photograph here.
Oh,
We
uh-huh.
have some historic photos. And it took a while to figure this out. And I just went through them about a month ago, because I gave some of these to one of my sons for his birthday. And I was like, what is that? What is that? What is that? And finally I looked at the Sonoma Hotel. And I went, I got it, because there's nothing there. There's
Yeah, there's
no
nothing there.
trees. There's no city hall.
Mhm.
Anyway. And there's a water tower back there. Do you see that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's still a water tower back there.
Is there?
Uh-huh.
Oh, I don't see you. Have to go
I
look.
think. Well, at least it was in the 70s. It's listed.
Ah,
That camera. So any questions or any specific things that maybe you want me to cover in another presentation?
So I have a question about HREs. I mean, I'd love to go through them because we get little
Sure.
history lessons, but I don't often have time. So what's the expectation of how thoroughly we review that or look at it? How would you approach that?
So I would say that the key aspect of the historic resource evaluation is actually the part 2 that we do. So first is it eligible or not? So it's gonna list, so I'm gonna go back up to here. In our historic resource evaluation, it is going to provide you with a lot of the background information, all the research and things. So if you don't want your history lesson, you jump and you're going to look at what's the significance. Does it meet these criterion? We call them criterion 1, which is the events, criterion 2, which is person. So you're going to look at those. Usually the very first sentence or the last sentence of that paragraph is going to say it does not meet criterion 1 or it does meet. And then you jump and you can see why they say yes or no. If you want more detail, then you go up to the beginning and you look at the research that they did. In the historic integrity section, which is the next part of it, they're going to talk about what is the integrity of the materials, the design, the feeling that are associated with that historic significance. Is it still, so if that significance is related to, let's say, an event, and that event happened in a specific year, does the building, structure, object represent that time period? Or has it changed? So something could be significant potentially for its association, but if it, let's say it was designed by Joe Smith, architect, I don't know. There's other common architects here. If it was designed by him, but now it doesn't look anything like his original design, but he's the reason why it potentially was significant, then it has no integrity. So it has to have both. It has to have significance and integrity. So it's important to look through those if you want to know the why. Why do they say it's eligible or not eligible? And then if it is eligible, when you look at the second part, so it's not the historic resource evaluation, but actually it's evaluation, how it meets the standards, you jump again to look at each one of those standards, and there's a paragraph in that document that says how it meets number 1, how does it meet number 2. So you're going to read those paragraphs to say, okay, it's saying that it meets it, that the replacement is okay because X, Y, and Z. The addition is okay because it can be replaced in, in the future, things like that. So those are the things that you're gonna look for.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You should be on those videos.
I used to be for 3 years. Yes. I used to put all those together. And get all those put in the conferences and do a little road show all around the state. So it was fun. Any other?
I mean, that's very helpful. I've been on this commission for a number of years, and we kind of got off into sign approvals and have ignore historic. So it's nice to have. This is very helpful. Appreciate it.
Definitely.
I also want to thank you because you brought all of those generic conversation in those presentations home and connected to our local significance. Thank you.
No problem.
The second slide, post quote, the 5 things that could be considered under, types of external properties. Just a question, would we ever have across this committee come through an object or a structure that would be like a bridge or like something more rather than a building? I'm just curious what could come across our agenda.
It potentially could. I mean, it's not. So I would say, if let's say Public Works wanted to do work on that bridge, then yes, I would bring it
Okay.
to you
Interesting.
for your review. I don't know that we would necessarily have anything left to designate, but I could be wrong. There could be another bridge out there that I don't know about. Things like that. Something that we don't really do here, which we don't necessarily have a lot of, would be cultural landscapes. One jurisdiction I worked in did have a landscape that was designated. The city landscaper from when the city started had a house, and he had designed his own landscape. And so that landscape was part of the designation with the house. And so part of our goal was when the new owners came in and they wanted to do things, that we worked with them on like, okay, this is why this is important to keep, and so things like that. I'm not sure if the rock pond in front is designated as one of these objects or not. I'm very curious. So this pond has been there for a long time. But the trees have not. So there is certain aspects of that landscape that may be historic in the plaza. I haven't looked very specific, but a lot of these trees came later on.
One of the photographs I have.
Can you hit your mic?
One of the photographs that I have is the camera is pointing towards Broadway, and there's nothing around it. It obviously was just built, and Broadway has, the buildings, but a dirt road and no cars. It's a really great photo. I'll bring them by one time. I'll pop you an email. I have quite a few.
Love to scan them.
Yeah, they're all scanned.
Please share. Please share.
So we have done some historic district work here, because we did the railroad district, and then there was the work on the Sebastiani district. Were those, I never heard the final status, were those?
They were adopted by the city. I do not think that they were submitted for the National Register or the California Register. I think
So-
they were just for our local use.
Is that something we should be doing more of or thinking about? Because I love the story. The Sebastiani one was all the houses on 4th next to the winery, and it had Augustine, I think it was his house or somebody, and all they called them the original VRBOs. They were actually vacation cottages, and go down that street and preserve that. I'm just wondering, should we be thinking more in those terms, like districts? Is that significant, or is that a big leap?
So if you remember from when you learned about the Broadway, so you did Broadway, the train depot, and Sebastiani at the same time. So if you remember, the idea behind a district is there are discontinuous districts. I don't recommend those. Those are harder, but a continuous district means that you have a number of structures that contribute to that time period, that represent that time period, so that you can see the Sebastiani. Majority of the structures that are in that district are all contributing. There's only a couple that aren't from that time period that he did not actually have developed, right? Train depot, same idea, but a lot smaller, right? We're only talking about a few houses because that's all that's remnant. So we don't make it larger or anything like that. I would have to look, but I don't know what the history of the overlay zone is, but I think the overlay zone was that first attempt at, we don't really have a district here, but there are structures here that maybe we want to preserve. That is a way that you can go about it. There are certain areas, if you have a grouping, let's say you had a contractor came in and he, in the 1920s, and developed a whole row, let's say a block, or maybe a couple of blocks, and they all look the same as they did back in the day. They have that integrity and they have that significance for the development of Sonoma, then that would be a potential district. But if there's only a couple of homes that are really important to our history or represent a specific style, or good examples, then those would be individually listed. I think we have, 116, but majority of those listed locally. majority of those are district contributors. So 86 alone are in the Plaza District of those 116. There's only a few that we have their individual resources.
Now, and isn't there some ability of the homeowner to be involved or to, I mean, I know a specific property I'm thinking of where they were wanting to go that way. Now the original owner didn't want to. He's passed, his wife was there, they were trying to decide, it went round and round, they decided not to. So is there some discretion of the property owner as whether they have the ability to join or not? Is it up to them?
Actually, it is. They do have that ability to opine on that. And when you go through the National Register process, it actually is, do you have owner consent or not, is a question that's asked when it's sent out. So it's not to say that it can't be listed, it's just, what is the owner's rights in that process? And sometimes the owners don't want their property listed. It doesn't mean it's not historic or determined eligible under CEQA. So our California Environmental Quality Act here actually says even if a property is not listed, it can be determined eligible and could be an environmental impact if it was demolished. So even if something's not listed, it can be considered historic. Because we have a discretionary process around our demolitions in the city. So we do look at that. That's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, wow.
I can only imagine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
Do we have issues updates?
From me first. No issues. Updates. I would like to do another presentation. We may, as of right now, we don't have anything for the next meeting. So just stay tuned. We may end up canceling it, or I may do another presentation like this. And so just stay tuned for that. In other news, we are kicking off our general plan update, and we will be doing that on October the 11th with a joint meeting with City Council and Planning Commission. They'll do the kickoff, and then we'll start our visioning in November. So we'll be getting the word out more about that in the coming week, and we really want the community to come out and participate in that process. So the general plan is our big policy document that sets all of our land use and transportation, natural and cultural resources, equity. These are all aspects of our general plan, and we're going to be discussing all of those. So the first workshops that we'll be having is visioning. So what do we see as the city of Sonoma in 2045? So what does that look like? And that is what we envision, and we want everybody to participate in that process. And so we'll put out more information on that. And I think those are the big things right now.
Thank you. Any further comments from the commission? All right, well then I will say this meeting is adjourned.
More slideshows.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Very good.
Oh.